All right. Hello, everyone. Let's see, what is this thing saying? Go live. LinkedIn. Is it going to let me? I'll just remove LinkedIn. It makes it easier. Bye-bye, LinkedIn. See if I can add it back, just in case. And then we will say save. And if this works, great. I have no idea if it's streaming to LinkedIn, but hello, everyone. Welcome to the Off by One security stream on this Saturday. Can you guys, whoever's here, let me know if you can hear me and see me okay? I'm in LA right now, and I'm in a bit of weird setup, so I'm using my phone for my earbuds because the audio isn't working right, but the camera is on a laptop. So just so I can make sure everybody can hear and see me, and then I'll just go ahead and get started here. See a few people saying hello, hello. Yes, all good. Thank you, Luan. Appreciate that. All right. So again, thanks for joining me on a Saturday, 11 a.m. Pacific time. I know it's a little bright in this room. I'm in a hotel room, and it's got like a sunroom in it, so it's really, really bright in here, and I can't do much about the camera. Looks like I'm about to get raptured. What does that mean? Oh, the ceiling fan, maybe? I don't know. But cool. So sweet. Thank you. So I don't have anything like in particular other than the things that you see up on the screen. I've been working, Defcon took a lot of preparation, just trying to collect all the data for the presentation. And I did a bunch of shout outs to folks who helped me out with that, like Brad Spangler and MSRC. They got me some really interesting data that a lot of it hadn't been seen before around vulnerability kind of statistics from Microsoft and related to the CVEs and the knowledge base numbers that they have with remote code execution bugs, with memory corruption, but also not just memory corruption, it went outside of that as well. And I'll see if I can grab it to throw it up here. I know I tweeted it, so if you look on my Twitter stream, you can see it there. And it shows just interesting stuff. Like I put up on the slide, like a cat and mouse game, meaning that obviously as bug classes get killed or mitigated to some degree, the attackers have to move elsewhere. So it's interesting to see at certain points of time on certain years, you'll see that an exploit category or type of bug that was being exploited or a technique that was widely being used all of a sudden drops down to very little after that. And I think that's just useful information. And I hadn't seen the information before from them outside of just memory corruption. So it was interesting to see other types of attack surfaces as well. So that's a cool one. I know Defcon hasn't posted the presentation officially, the one that I did, or I don't think many of them at all. I don't know when they will, but if you go on the Discord, someone screen captured it and shared it there. So you should still be able to see it there on my Discord, the Off by One Discord, if you do want to check that one out. But let's start off at the top here with the future streams. So I didn't have a stream last week. Again, Defcon needed a week off, and it takes some work getting people to join. I like doing solo streams for sure, but it's also great to have guests on. And I've been very fortunate. We've been very fortunate to have some really awesome people come on and join. And I think a lot of these people don't really do streams very often. Some of them do, some of them don't. How do you access Discord? If somebody has the Discord link, can you post it up in the chat? That'd be awesome. I don't have it all. I can check to see if I have it. Actually, I might have it in the banners. I don't have my marketing guy here that usually helps out with that. Let's see if it's, yeah, here it is. Cool. I'll show it right now. So that right there is the Discord server. I'll leave that up for a little bit. But it is, you know, a lot of guests don't do streams. One stream that I have coming up is from Melissa Assange, and I know her in particular doesn't do a whole lot of streams, and I know that she's charging, if you go to her website now, she's charging, you know, thousands of dollars to do a stream, which is totally respectable and everything. But, you know, she's willing to do a stream with me since this is all about giving back to the community. There's no money being made here. Any money I get, as you saw with Defcon, I give it straight back to the community to see where we can help out. So she's going to join on. I'm excited about that one. I'm not exactly sure what she's going to talk about yet, but hopefully, you know, could be something to do with hypervisor escape, like she did in the Pwn to Own challenge years ago. I'm sure you might have saw that kind of got weird, where she used an exploit that she wrote against a vulnerability she discovered, and it worked. But then I think it was Oracle. Was it Oracle or VMware? I can't remember which platform. But they came back and said it was a duplicate, that they already knew about that vulnerability. But here's the thing, it wasn't patched yet. So if somebody finds something and it's not yet patched and they use it in pwn to own, you should absolutely pay them. I mean, that's not fair. So I think that some money was given to her. I don't know if it was from the vendor or someone else through donation, but thankfully she got paid for her research, because that's that's lame, you know. So she'll be coming on. We'll see what she's going to talk about. I've got Chompy coming back on. It's not going to be until October, but she's going to come back on. She posted a blog recently where she went through kind of, the one I'm thinking of is the one that she used for Pwn to Own 2024, and talked about the methodology, because I think that's a question a lot of people have around vulnerability research. There's a different stages of it, right? You've got the fuzzing or static analysis, however you find the vulnerability, the bug. That's step one. And then determining whether or not it looks like something that can be weaponized is the next step. So you've got to obviously do more reversing. You've got to debug it. You've got to create whatever it is to try and trigger and get to the breakpoints you want to get to, so you can do further analysis. And that's very time consuming. It can be very time consuming. And then you've got the actual exploit writing part itself. And nowadays, a lot of it takes a lot of heap massaging or heap grooming, whatever you want to call it, to try to get things in a predictable state so that your data is laid out in memory the way you want. And that's one of the things I'm going to talk about when we get to CVE 2024, the TCP/IP bug. We'll talk about that briefly and kind of the challenges you run into in that situation. But she's going to talk about that, like her methodology. And that's the thing. Everybody uses some things that are consistent across the board. Other people do things differently from one another. And, you know, I found bugs in a really almost embarrassing manner before, where I'm not proud of the way I found the bug. But who cares if you find the bug? It's just like when you write code, like historically, and even today still, people are hesitant oftentimes to release their code. And it might be their exploit code, it might be a tool that they wrote or whatever, a script, because a lot of people in the community are jerks and they want to pick at the code that you wrote. Oh, why did you take 20 lines to do something that you can do in 2 lines? And instead of offering constructive feedback and saying, oh, that's interesting that you found it that way. Like if you didn't know, there's another way you can do that much more efficiently or quickly. And, you know, that's the way to get back. It's funny. There's this guy, Joey Swole. I don't know if you ever heard of that guy. He's like some YouTuber, and he works on it all the time. Basically calls people out who are rude in the gym. So you'll have people filming someone doing an exercise and they're doing it wrong, and they're like, haha, look at this idiot. And then he always comes on and blasts them and says, you know, instead of doing that, why don't you go up to the person and offer them some assistance if they want it? Don't be a jerk. Don't record it and post it. It's a similar kind of thing in the world of exploit writing and code, where, you know, you can be hesitant to release something because you might think that someone might blast you for your code, but who cares, right? And you know, you were always learning. No one ever knows everything. I mean, I'm still learning to this day, and we'll never know everything, obviously. So just the point I wanted to make. So she's going to talk about her methodology as to how she found that particular bug and the way she goes about doing things. And she's been quite successful. So I think that it's going to be a great session. So I've got next Friday, I've got Doug McKee coming on. He works at Dell SonicWall, and really smart guy. And he wrote a course on combating supply chain attacks through product security testing. And what he's going to do is an excerpt from the course, which is going to be around if you come across an undocumented network protocol, which happens a lot. If you've ever done, you know, red teaming or whatever, or if you ever done product security testing, a lot of times Wireshark might not know that protocol. Obviously, it'll decode it to the best it can, but above the layer 4, it's not really going to know what it is. So how would you go about taking an undocumented protocol and making sense of it? And I think that's really useful information. So I'm looking forward to that stream. That'll be next Friday. I've got Laurie Wired is going to come on. I think next month. We're still sorting a date. She came to my Defcon talk, and we talked a bit afterward about trying to find a date. So she'll be on. So 3 amazing women coming on soon, and Doug. And then I'm talking to Wasker Tejeda, who is a brilliant guy, especially on the Linux side and development side. Wasker, he's one of my co-authors on Gray Hat Hacking, and he's also part of my product company, which is separate. And well, there's a lot I can say about him, but one thing he did was he wrote an extension to Jeff, GEF, the exploit extension for GDB, which is called Heap Me. and it's a heap visualization tool for Linux. So anytime malloc or realloc or free or whatever gets called, it's got hooks in there, and it takes the context, sends it to a web server, and has time travel debugging. So everything that's going on while you're debugging the heap on a Linux app is being recorded time travel style, so you can visualize. Because obviously, if you're in GDB and you're staring at a bunch of hex on the screen, it can be hard to like make sense of it. So I'm gonna have him on. I'm not sure what we're gonna talk about yet, but it'll probably be something on the Linux side of the house, where he's brilliant at. Jonathan Ryder, he's been on many times. He's going to come on again. I think we're going to get into kernel mode implant writing, like something around that area. Last time he was on, we talked about userland implant writing, and I think we're going to look at the kernel a bit more on this one. And then I'm talking to my friend Peter Danview. He has a company called Secure Code Warrior out of Australia, and it's a gamified platform for developers to learn how to find vulnerabilities or write better code, and it's like a CTF game style. It's really, really cool. So I'm gonna have him on as well. Like, those are some of the guests that I've got coming up. So I just wanted to kind of touch on that. And as usual, and as I said in the tweet, if you have a stream that you would like to see, if you have a guest that you would like to see, I can try my best. Or if you want to introduce me to somebody. I've got Nop. Nop's going to come on. I don't know if he's here right now, but he's going to come on. We're going to set a date to talk through control flow guard. So he spent a lot of time reversing control flow guard, and which is a mitigation, of course, that watches for indirect calls on Windows. So if you do an indirect call, then before it lets you jump to some pointer that's dynamically, created during runtime, it does a check. It makes sure that compared to a bitmap, that the address you're going to is within a 16-byte boundary of where function entry points are. So that'll be an interesting one. He was at Hackfest in Amsterdam a few weeks ago, and I was there for that one, and he did a similar talk. So this will be on the stream, so it'll be recorded for everybody. So that's another good one. I think that's all off the top of my head. But if you want to see a stream, then let me know. On the Discord, you can post it in the channel, and if you know this person, maybe you can introduce me if I don't know them. I've had really good success and luck reaching out to people and them getting back to me. And again, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that this is a platform to give back to the community. There's no monetization or anything. I don't plan at some point to flip a switch and start trying to make money off the channel. That's not what this is about. I do fine in my other work. So I think that's one of the reasons people are willing to come on, which is really, really cool. So appreciate all of you guys help and support the channel. The only thing I wish the channel would do, and I'm gonna read the questions here in a moment. I see some comments and I haven't looked at them yet. But the one thing that you can do for me is leave comments on the videos, because I've had a lot of people come to me and they're like, hey, even people like John Hammond and David Bombal and everybody, like, they're like, you need more engagement on it, because I do live streams. I don't do videos and then post them. So that makes it less likely people are going to comment, obviously, during the streams. But that's super helpful with the engagement to get the channel to grow, because I think we only have like 20 to 23,000 subscribers right now, which is plenty. But when you look at these other channels, they have millions. I think that's crazy. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that this is more advanced content that we typically do. So it's not as approachable or digestible for a lot of people who are just getting into it, even though I try to do some of those things as well. But anything you can do to help grow the channel is awesome, because obviously that means more giving back to the community, the more any kind of money comes in or anything like that. So I'm also talking to miscreants about getting some artwork done, because as I'm sure you've noticed, my thumbnails are not very good. I'm never going to be the person that does the thumbnails where you're like, making silly faces and stuff like that. I just don't like that. It's kind of cringy to me, but it works, but I'm not going to do it. But I do need better art. So Miscreant is going to help me with some artwork. And they're really cool in that if you're like a nonprofit, which, we're not technically a nonprofit, but this is the same thing, they'll do your artwork for free. So they're going to do my artwork for the channel, and I can use it for merch and stuff like that. And of course I'll promote them. And, but I think that's really cool. It's great when people help each other out like that. So let me go and check some, now that I'm done with the future streams, well, let me go read back and see if I missed anything. How many hours does it take for a researcher to find some important bug? Plus writing the exploit to get paid for researching. Yeah. Well, it depends. If you're working somewhere like Palo Alto in a labs group, or if you're working at IBM X-Force or Project Zero at Google, or those types of places, you're getting paid to do that stuff. So usually if you are in like a project zero type position, unless you're entry level, you're paid really well. I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Some guys are making over 7 figures. So you're not going to get paid for actually selling the exploit or anything. I always go back to the example in Singapore in SciScan like 10 years ago, where a couple researchers at Project Zero found over 60 double fetch kernel local privilege escalation vulnerabilities, something like that. It was around 60 or so. And they gave them all to Microsoft. I mean, that's millions of dollars in exploits, and they disclosed it all to Microsoft because that's their job, and they're paid, well by Google. And so that's one way. But usually to get those positions, you've got to have some pretty good experience under your belt. There are intern opportunities. I know a lot of people have asked about that in the past, like how do you get an intern position doing this type of stuff? Honestly, I've answered that question before, and I'm happy to answer it again. But starting doing research, posting your research, writing tools, doing presentations, networking and making friends in the community, cold call, like reach out to these companies like IO Active and others and just say, hey, do you guys have an opportunity for an intern? I know, Exodus Intelligence does that sometimes, where they'll take on interns, and if you're good, then they'll hire you. But the type of work they're doing is advanced, like V8, Chrome, browser exploitation and beyond. So it's really tough stuff. So you got to really learn to live and breathe it. But other than that, you're living paycheck to paycheck, and there's going to be dry months. I never had it so good as I did back in like 2013, 14. I've said that a million times with exploiting Internet Explorer and other browsers. The use after free bugs and type confusion bugs were just through the roof, and there were no mitigations against it. So you were easily finding one vulnerability a month that you can weaponize. I think my best year was like 8 use after freeze or something, but that's pretty good. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars back then. And so nowadays, you're not going to find that many that quickly. But when you do, as I talked about in my stream a couple of weeks ago on selling exploits, if you're interested in that, go watch that stream because I cover a lot in that one and talk all about it. But the money you get paid for like a full chain right now is in the millions potentially. So obviously it's worth it. But to be honest, a lot of times you'll work your butt off for a long time and you won't find anything, and months can go by, and no money's coming in. So a lot of us do it as a side hustle. We just try to prioritize it and do what we can, because it's hard to make just a pure living off of just exploit writing, especially memory corruption bugs. In the browser space, like not browser, but the web bounty space, there's a ton more competition. But I know a ton of people who make a living off that. And as I said in that stream as well, there's also people making a living off of weaponizing patched vulnerabilities, because patches come out and most organizations don't patch very quickly. But over 90% of CVEs are privately disclosed, meaning there's no public exploit or technical details. So it's up to somebody to diff that, figure it out, weaponize it. And the faster you do that, the more money it's going to be worth, because companies don't patch. And it's just the truth. So that's something to consider as well. All right, how to become exploit developer. Yeah, it's don't sleep, don't go out and hang out with your friends. No, I'm just kidding. But it's a lot of nowadays. It's a lot of sacrifice on the good side. You have access today to so much information that was not there when I started. That's why things were slower early on, because when you can't Google something and get a response right away, or when you don't have these amazing fuzzers, or you don't have a site like Virgilius project that has all the kernel structures available, and the latest IDA plugins. And when you don't have that stuff, it's a lot more time consuming. So research and progress was a lot slower compared to today. You can go and get all that information for free and just work your butt off and get caught up. But obviously the bad side of it is it's really hard today. I just announced at Hackfest, I'm going to talk about Hackfest just like in a second here, but Connor McGarr is going to come out. And the reason I bring that up is because Connor is going to talk about reverse engineering virtualization-based security mitigations on Windows. And it's not going to be a talk about bypass techniques, because honestly, there aren't a whole lot of them. It's more about like what you have to deal with today as a Windows exploit developer with these mitigations. The execute primitive is very unlikely in the kernel. Bring your own vulnerable driver is a very hot thing for years now, but that doesn't work when you've got VBS on. When you've got KCET and you've got kernel control flow guard and you've got HVCI and all these other ones, your driver's not going to be able to execute that code. And read write primitives are the best you can hope for, which thankfully today you can still steal the token, elevate your privileges and all that stuff. But who knows at what point that's not going to be possible anymore. I'm blown away that you can still steal the system token at PID 4 and get that to work. I have not found a good answer yet. And I've talked to so many people at Microsoft around why can't they protect that? If the system process for PID 4 is the only one who should have its own token, then why can't that be protected and not copied and placed into another process's e-process structure? Like, that's just mind-blowing to me, but whatever. All right, so let me go through a couple other questions. I'm gonna do more Q&A at the end, but let me just see. How to really good at CTS. Yep. Yeah, people go to CTS, and part of that is like some people are just naturally talented at CTFs. I know some great exploit developers who just aren't very good at CTFs, and I think a lot of that has to do with the way in which you approach things. Now, it is very similar, though. That's one of the good things about CTFs is maybe what you're working on isn't very real world, but the approach that you're taking, the tools that you're using, the reversing skills, that all still applies. So you learn a ton from CTFs. But yeah, there's just some people are just really more inclined to be CTF people. But obviously, the more you do it, the better you get. A lot of it has to do as well with the tricks. I gave one example. I did a stream or a video a while ago on the channel on something called Flirt and Flare with IDA. And that is a signature database, or not database, but signatures that you can generate. So you create Flirt signatures using Flare. And basically all you're doing is you're taking the Linux, well, it doesn't have to be Linux, but the library files and the archives, the .a. So if you see libc.so.6, you want the .a, the archive file. And then you generate a Flirt signature by running Flare against it. And it basically goes through all the functions inside all the functions that are exported from the exports table or the, whatever. And it creates a signature in hex, a hexadecimal signature that is unique for that specific function. And then when you apply the Flirt signature against a statically compiled binary, it's able to go through and match those patterns and tell you what's library code and what's not library code. So that's just an example of something that some CTF teams have and are really good at, and makes them just a lot more efficient. Because if you don't have that and you find out you've been reversing library code for 2 hours, obviously you're not going to be as effective as the other team. So a lot of it's about the team members that you have and the tricks and everything like that. See here. Sorry if I missed something cool. Okay. Thanks, appreciate it. Yeah, 7 figures. I know guys at Google making over $1 million a year. Absolutely. A lot of that has to do with the RSUs that you get, the restricted stock units, and how they stack over the years. How do you balance learning new topics as your plan knowledge? Yeah, let me. There's a lot of comments coming up, which is awesome. But I want to make sure I get through some of these things, and I'll go back to Q&A. So if I miss your question, like I'm not ignoring it. Just post it back at the end again. But let me talk about Hackfest Hollywood real quick. Let me go over here and bring up a screen. Where is it? There it is. This guy here. So Hackfest Hollywood, this is a conference, a summit that I'm responsible for. So it's sponsored by SANS Institute, but it's free for online. I don't understand these companies that, and I'm not going to name any, you know who they are. I don't understand how they can charge for online presentations. Like, if you're doing an online course, that's one thing. But if you have a summit or a conference where it's nothing but one talk after the next, why would you charge people for that? It doesn't make sense. But anyway, that's not my problem. We're not charging for it online, and we usually end up getting a few thousand people online attending at once, which is awesome. Because that way, again, it's giving back to the community. Now, if you're going to come in person, which obviously I recommend because it's way more fun when you're there, you get breakfast both days, you get lunch both days, you get evening beers and snacks and food both. You get, and then there's a ton of summit workshops that are going on. Like we've got a hardware hacking workshop going on. We've got a AI hacking workshop going on. We've got a bunch of other stuff. and a lot of talk. So we've got Connor McGar, as I mentioned, he's coming and talking. We've got Yarden Shafir is the day 2 keynote. David Weston, Dwizzle at Microsoft, he's like the head of all OS, is coming down for the day 1 keynote. So really great speakers, and the whole list is up on the website if you go to it. But there's probably like 8 or 9 talks each day, and then a bunch of workshops. And then also we're going to go over to Universal Studios because it's Halloween Horror Nights over there, and the conference is in Hollywood at Universal City. So it's literally one block, like a 5-minute walk to Universal Studios down through Universal City Walk. So, and we'll probably do some other stuff during the night. I don't know. We usually like rent out a room and have villages or just networking and music and drinks and stuff like that. So obviously it's always best if you can come in person. I'm going to give away actually two free seats for in person, not on this stream, but in a future stream. Just so if you can get to LA, if you get to Hollywood, then you can come attend for free. It's $425. I also have some discount codes I can probably get to get like 20% off or something. So it's not that much money. It's $350 or something like that. I know it's a lot to some people, but it's a lot less than obviously going and taking a training course. But yeah, that's just something I wanted to talk about because it's cool. It's very small by design. It's only going to be like 125, 150 people there max. We keep it intentionally small, which is really good for networking and stuff like that. Like last year when we had it in Hollywood, we had Alina Lau and Ruben Boonen and Connor McGar and Chompy, and everybody's just sitting out in the lobby and hanging out talking. So it's a really great opportunity to have like those in-person conversations, to ask good questions about vulnerability research or whatever it might be. So yeah, if you can, if you live in the LA area, obviously it's way easier, but if it's something you want to come out to, I'd love to have you there. So I just wanted to talk about that briefly, and I'll probably have some of the speakers come on before the event to talk about their talk and give away some tickets. All right, what did I have next on my list here? Give me a second. CVE. Why is this not working? My screen is not like updating very fast. Okay, so we did future streams, Hollywood Hackfest, CVE 2024. So this guy here was that really spooky TCP/IP bug, and the CVSS score was 9.8, and they said the complexity was low. Now that when you see that is mind blowing, right? I mean, that's like that sounds like another MS 08067 or even back to like MS, the Blaster RPC decom vulnerability. It's rare that you see something that's got a 9.8 on the CVSS and low complexity. Now, here's the thing. After talking to some people and after looking at it, it is, this is one Marcus Hutchins. Yeah, I saw Marcus Hutchins talking about, I saw him post something about jumbo frames, and I don't know what he was talking about there. Maybe he found something that other people didn't, or maybe he went down the wrong path, which is very common for all of us. Yeah, I stopped looking at the post after that one because I just think he was going down the wrong path. The problem with it is that it ended up being not as easy. It doesn't look nearly as easy as the implicate that they were saying it was. To say that the complexity is low should imply that it should be something you can figure out in a day, honestly. And then the 9.8 scoring says that it should be something that's realistically exploitable. Now, mind you, that you need more pieces in the chain, right? It's typically not just one exploit and you win. I would imagine you need a memory leak from the kernel. So you're going to need to leak out. You're going to need a kernel pointer leak so that you can do your, know where you are basically. And then you need to weaponize the vulnerability itself for the remote code execution. And then you also need to do the heap massaging, the heap grooming. So it's not as easy as just like, oh, if you weaponize this one thing, it's game over. It still has to be tied to other things. I think people for a long time got spoiled where someone writes an exploit, ports it to Metasploit. Remember the old days? And it just worked. You just type exploit and boom, you're in, like MS 08067. Those days are gone. I mean, it's extremely rare that someone would package up an exploit chain and put it into Metasploit where it just has 100% reliability and does the kernel pointer leaking, all that stuff. So just because it says 9.8 doesn't mean that other components aren't needed. Like, you still need those other things, but it should mean that it's a dangerous one that will allow for remote code execution if you can couple it with those other things. So that all being said, after looking at it and after talking to some people and comparing notes, it doesn't seem to be what they said it was. I think, and many other people think that rating is way too generous. I think it should be probably closer to like a 6 or a 7, honestly. We'll talk about why here for a little bit if you want to take a look at this stuff. So let me go back over and we'll take a look at a couple things. So here's IDA, and I'm not going to spend time like showing you how to do the diff and all that. That's common knowledge, but I did the diff, right? And you can see over on the right, I know it's kind of small, but it says one function change, only one single function, and it's called IPv6p process options. If you're familiar with IPv6, back in IPv4, if you wanted to use something like VPN, like ESP and AH, encapsulating security payload and authentication header, then for IPsec, you would need that had to be shimmed in. Like, they split the layers and shoved this new thing inside, right? With IPv6, they built it into the protocol, but there's not enough room in the header, the actual header itself, to fit all of that stuff. And there's other types of headers as well. There's like a handful, like less than 10, I think. And another one would be like source routing is another example of an extension on IPv6. So when you see something like IPv6 process options, that's what it sounds like, right? Just the name itself sounds like it's saying process the IPv6 extensions, the options. So a lot of times these symbol names, as well as the CVE notification itself, like what Microsoft writes up in the vulnerability report, that oftentimes is going to help you greatly. One of the things that it said in the actual vulnerability announcement, and I can't see the comments right now, by the way, I'm on the screen with IDA Pro. One of the things it said in the announcement is a series of packets, like plural packets. So that's another big hint, because it's not like it's going to be one magic packet that gets thrown at a box and you root it. It's going to take multiple packets. So that right there alone increases the complexity. Because now, if you think about a busy system, there's constantly data coming in and out of it. Even if you're not touching the keyboard, there's telemetry, there's just constant network traffic going on. So if this exploit would require that you send multiple packets, who knows how many, then that makes you immediately think about how are you going to get things to line up properly. Obviously, you need to understand more about the bug, but it's just a consideration for now. And this is all the objective stuff without even touching anything, just reading the symbols and the vulnerability report. So a lot of people ask, well, how would I even approach this? How do I know? Like, this is an example. I'm just going to make a side point for a second. And I'm sorry if I ramble sometimes. You can always drop off if you're annoyed. But so I see sometimes people leave a comment like, oh, you talk too much about this one thing. It's like, well, then don't watch, dude. It's like, I'm doing this for free if anybody wants to watch. But a long time ago, I've said this in prior streams, I had a project where I got months to reverse engineer TCP/IP.sys. Basically, the customer said, hey, take this driver. We want to know what the life of a packet is. Like, if a packet hits your box, once it hits the NIC, what happens to it? How does it get processed? Where does it get stored in memory? And there's different types of packets, obviously. There's hundreds of protocols and different headers and bit masks and everything. So that was a pretty complex. I was hungry at the time, and I was a bit younger. And so the number that they flashed in front of me, the dollar amount, was high enough for me to like get pretty excited about it. So without putting too much thought into it, I said yes. And the initial project was supposed to be for 3 months. And it ended up taking me a lot longer. And that's not their fault. That's my fault for just not thinking about it. So I had to work probably double the amount of time that was originally intended. Now, the money still worked out. It was still good, but I didn't get any more money from them. What's my point? My point is that This is just one example of an attack surface, TCP/IP, that is, and the driver itself. No one can know everything. The more experience you have working in different environments and performing different jobs and reversing different things, the easier things are going to be for you. Like, I know by looking at packet headers, and I mean, I've written tons of TCP/IP exploits and denial of service stuff before. So my point is, your familiarity with something is what's going to speed you up. If you're coming into this and you don't know anything about TCP/IP beyond like what a packet is, it's going to be a struggle. But the good news is that time that you put into it, really document your Gator database, IDA database, Binjo, whatever you're using. Document the hell out of it, because there's no way you're going to remember everything. And then when a new vulnerability comes up, or like if you're patch diffing, or if you find something new, your prior knowledge and documentation of that driver, for example, is going to be priceless. So that's one point. This is why a lot of people, when they come into the industry out of university, or from a different type of career altogether, they want to go straight into cybersecurity, which is totally cool. But there is so much knowledge that comes from having worked in different IT disciplines. Like, I was a network engineer and a network architect for a long time early in my career. That's just one example of something I did. So my knowledge of routing and switching is super helpful when I'm reverse engineering a Cisco router with GDB through Dynamips or something, right? So like, my point is just, don't think that it's always requirement to go straight into security only. Like, it's not a bad idea to go learn and work around systems. Anyway, back to this though. And again, I can't see the comments, so I'm sorry if you're posting things and I can't see them. Let me just start going through this. So we see this function, I know it's small, called IPv6P process options. We talked about what IPv6 options are. So this is a beautiful thing when patch diffing, and I've done patch diffing presentations before, or streams before, is that Microsoft gives us the symbols. So we say thank you, right? That's amazing that we get the PDB files. Not for everything, but for most things. So they don't do patch obfuscation, which is also great. There's multiple reasons why they don't do that, but they don't. And so what that means is, when we do a diff, if it's a security fix, typically all we see when we do a differential are the functions that had code changes in direct relation to the patch vulnerability. And that is finding a needle in a haystack and knowing exactly where it is. So this is very common, where you only see one function that has changes. And that might make you think, well, this is going to be easy then. That it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be easy at all. But it is nice when you only have one function to worry about. If you ever do a diff and you see that there's like hundreds of functions with changes in it, then you're probably diffing the wrong data, the wrong files. The way that I recommend doing it, now there's two ways to do it. You can download the patches and extract them, and there's tools to help you do that, which is fine, but it's going to be slower. Or you can just go to winbindex.com or whatever it is, and download the patches there. It's really easy to do it, and you just go to the version of Windows, like Windows 11, 23H2, whatever, and you can, right below the patch is going to be the last time that file, that driver, that DLL, whatever, was updated. So those are the two that you're going to diff. And when you diff it, this is the result you should get. So when we look at this function, I think I've still got bin diff up. Let me see. Give me a second here. Yeah, right here. So here is bin diff. And what we're looking at right now is on the left side, sorry, system's going really slow. On the left side, where it says primary, that is the unpatched version, because that's the one I've got loaded in the IDA database right now. And the secondary on the right side is the patched version. And so when you look at these blocks, and again, there's plenty of streams out there showing you how to do patch diffing, but you can see the greenish ones. Those are the ones that have no code changes between them. And these are blocks in the function. The ones that are like that light yellow brownish color, those are blocks that exist on both sides, but there's code changes in them. Most of the time, those code changes are not useful at all. And then down at the bottom here, let me zoom into it. Give me a second here. It's gonna let me zoom. I don't want it to reorder things. It's being annoying. Oh, here we go. Zoom to basic block. The system's going really slow. So now it's zooming in. This block here, notice that it doesn't exist on the other side. And it says call IPP send error. The other side has something above it that says IPP send error list, but the patch version has IPP send error. So like that's the kind of stuff you're looking for. Now, when I think when the vulnerability came out, it said that it's a integer underflow. And so the first thing I did was go in and start looking for changes around the logic, because logic changes was what you might expect to see if it's an integer issue. And so I found something higher up. Let me see if I can go to the decompiler real quick. I'm gonna look at the browser screen to make sure you guys can still see me. Okay, cool. All right, great. So I'm gonna go back over to IDA. I'm sorry if the camera's blown out. I'm like super bright because this room has got the sun right above me and the camera's not adjusting. But I've got here pseudocode. This is, and in this version here, I haven't done any, I haven't cleaned it up a bit, but let me see if I can find some arithmetic where I thought the issue might be. This is the first place I went to. Where is it? Give me a second here. This right here. So again, I know it's kind of small on the screen, but this line right there, you can see it says variable 10, and it says minus e equals v16. I looked, there's no validation going on to make sure that the one variable is big enough to where if you subtract from it, it's still going to be a positive number. So I thought, okay, maybe that's where there's going to be an underflow issue because we're going to go negative. And so I start looking at the surrounding logic, and I couldn't find anything that was doing any checks. So I thought maybe that might be an example where the bug could be. But it ends up being a little easier than that, at least superficially easier to find out what path you need to go down. So I gave up pretty quickly on this one because I did some more kind of just reversing around it, and it wasn't making much sense. And so if you go back over here to the bin diff view, you see this call to IPP send error down there. And again, that doesn't exist on the other side. There's IPP send error list. Let me see if I can move this up a bit. I don't know why bin diff is being really slow right now, but it's not like letting me move things very easily. So you can see this discard receive packets. That ends up being important. We'll talk about that here in a moment. I mean, the stream's not to sit here and talk about this bug all day, but just wanted to show a couple things. But that discarding packet ends up being something that's pretty important. Let's go into this function now. So IPv6P process options. All right. So right now I'm inside of IPv6P. No, I'm not. I'm in IPv6 add hop by hop options header. So this ends up being something that is applicable as well. So one of the next things that I did on this one was use Scapy to start crafting IPv6 packets and setting breakpoints in the kernel debugging session to see if I could trigger it, if I could reach these functions. And what typically ends up happening when you go that route, you'll get somewhere and you start having to look at the cross references. So like right now we're on IPv6P add hop by hop options header. And if we look at the function calls, you can see there are no function calls to this, which means it's going to be indirectly called. It's not going to be a direct call. So if we go back over and we go to that other function, IPv6P process options, this is the one that's involved in the patch. All right, this guy here, this is the one involved in the patch, and I'll zoom in a bit so you can see a bit better. Right now we're at the top of the function, or we were at the top of the function. I don't know what just happened here. And if we look at the cross references on this guy, there are two callers to this function up top, and on the bottom, those functions are called from this function. This is one of the many useful things in IDA is just this function calls window, because again, you're seeing cross references in both directions, callers and callees. So on the bottom are all the functions that the function involved in the patch currently calls in the unpatched version. And you can see right up top there, IPP discard receive packets, IPP send error list. In the patched version, do I have that up? Let me see if I've got the patched version up. Is this it? Let me check this. Yeah, this is the patched version. So if we go to the same function in the patched version, let me make sure we're at the right function. We are. And we look at function calls. You can see down here, there's IPP send error and IPP send error list. So send error and send error list. If we go back over to the other version, you can see there's only IPP send error. So that's a new function call. Like that's really one of the only differences in this patch is a call to send error instead of send error list, depending on a condition. So this is going to drive you down the road of like, well, how the hell do I get to this? How do I know what that is? How do I find it? That's what I was saying. That's what I was about to say before is when you look at the callers and you set breakpoints in your kernel debugging session and you start sending IPv6 packets with Scapy and you don't hit the breakpoints, you need to start doing cross references backwards, 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 and setting breakpoints on all of them. And then get as far as you can, get as close as you can to the function that you want to call. Like in this case, I want to call IPv6p process options, but I'm not getting there from a basic Scapy packet with IPv6. Well, look at the name, process options. So then you go and start turning the IPv6 options on. And when you do that, and this requires you to look at the RFC and stuff, or use Scapy to read through the documentation, then you start hitting the breakpoints that you want to hit. That's where you start learning about, oh, that's how I knew about hop by hop option, because when I set the breakpoint, we actually hit it, and it's an indirect call from the very function we're looking at. And so you end up having it, I think it was 2 extensions that needed to be turned on. One of them was hop by hop, and then you get where you want to go. So there's a WinDebug extension that was written a long time ago, and it's called CMKD. And it's got a bang packet command in it. So it's a WinDebug extension. It's got a command called bang packet. It's one of the most useful extensions that I first started using for TCP/IP debugging, because it's not easy to find out where the packets are in memory. Like if I said to you, hey, go find me this packet in memory, how are you going to do that? Right? It's not as easy as that. And when you start debugging TCP/IP, you find out that all the packets are actually stored in kernel memory, which makes sense because it's a driver that's handling it. So inside the non-paged pool in the kernel are where the packets are. But there's buffers associated with it, right? And there's going to be multiple packets that are going to be coming in constantly. Some of them are going to be related to a TCP stream, and some of them are going to be unrelated other TCP streams or other protocols. So making sense of all this stuff can be a challenge. And then once you start building out the structures, you'll see that like, okay, register 14 offset 60 is the starting point of some packet. Then you can give that address to bang packet, and it will dump out the packet for you and show you all about it in kernel memory, which again, you start documenting, you start setting more breakpoints. And what you end up finding is that, well, let's go into something real quick here. Hold on. I'm going to go to the unpatched one, and we'll look at the callers again. And there's this call to IPP send error list. If we go into this IPP send error list function, which is only in the unpatched version, let's decompile it. It's quite small, still coming up. Wow, there it goes. So look how small that is, right? It's like a tiny little function, doesn't do very much. And so you would think, oh, that makes it easy to document, but it actually ends up being quite opaque structures. There's very opaque structures, meaning that they are just not documented anywhere, and there's no help for you. So this is where the reversing comes in, where you've got to really start figuring out what things are at what offsets to the registers in relation to the packet, what has to do with the stream of interest with the IPv6 options turned on that you care about. Let me jump over to the patch version real quick. I'm not going to spend too much longer on this because obviously this can go on all day. And so here's the patch version. I'm going to go to send error. If it takes me. There we go. So we'll decompile this guy. Look how small that is. So this is the send error. The other one was send error list. And what you end up getting is a buffer. And here's the summary of it. Because you care about the vulnerability, right? You can discard packets. So if you look at the IPv6 RFC, so the RFC for IPv6 and extensions, you can actually discard packets. And you saw that function call that we talked about earlier right here. Oh, not that one. This one right here. Let's go back. This, where did it go? Discard receive packets. That is enabled device usage is another one that comes into play and is something we need to care about. But is this IPv discard receive packets? So this function here, if it can't make sense, if something's wrong with the IPv6 packet, like it's an unsupported extension, because obviously when you have extensions, there's going to be arguments that are passed to what processes the extensions to figure out what you're trying to do. And if the option is unsupported, then it discards the packet. So this ends up getting related to the vulnerability where there's a NetIO buffer. Let's go back a second here. This is enabled device usage. This thing pops up commonly now in when you look at vulnerabilities lately that are patched. But this right here, it has something directly to do with the vulnerability as well. But again, it is if you intentionally discard packets and you send a bunch of IPv6 packets that are part of like a stream, some of them are valid, some of them are invalid. With the right extensions turned on, the options turned on, then there could be a resulting integer underflow based on the arithmetic that happens and things getting kind of out of order and like into the negative. And that's how you would go about getting outside to a memory region that you're not supposed to be able to get to. The challenge comes in. So here's the challenge though. And I said this earlier, is in the order of the packets. If it's a busy system, which most systems, even if you're not using them, are pretty busy, then you need to be able to groom the heap using packets so that things are laid out in a very specific way so that indirectly at offsets, you control the data. So it requires heap grooming through the use of packets, which is kind of not unorthodox, but it's weird. It's funny because in an old version of a course that I teach, 760, it's one of the courses I author of. We used to go through a TCP/IP bug like this. And one thing that we did was sprayed the kernel with IPv6 packets on 64-bit Windows 8 at the time. And you could spray the kernel pool with packets that had nothing but basically giant NOP sleds in it. Now, not 9 zeros, but equivalent NOPs, like 0Cs and things like that. That's like a OR AL instruction. And you could groom the heap and put little jumps. So I had to calculate it to where like you basically do a denial of service almost. You spray the kernel pool with these IPv6 packets and they stay stored in memory. They stay resident forever due to the vulnerability. We were triggering two vulnerabilities. And one of them was the TCP/IP fin weight 2 vulnerability that would leave a connection forever open. And so that way it's always stored in the pool. So you flood the pool with these packets. At the end of the packet, you put little jumps. So a jump instruction that jumps to the offset that begins the payload of the next packet, which is all the NOPs. Same thing, jump, 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 jump. And then you have your shellcode down at the end to get that to work. Now, it involved other stuff too, like return-oriented programming, but that was just something really cool that you could do. So it is possible to groom the heap with packets in a way that could make sense. But this bug is way more technical than what they said it was in the announcement. And I don't know, I haven't spent much time on it beyond this because it just doesn't seem one that's going to be fruitful. Like if I'm going to put a lot of time into reversing something and take weeks to do it, then I want to be pretty confident that it's something I'm going to be able to exploit. And I didn't feel like, and I could be completely wrong. I'm the first person to say it, and I'm not even embarrassed if somebody is able to figure it out and they're like, dude, all you have to do is this. I will learn from that, and that's awesome, right? So I hope somebody does figure it out, but it's not going to be me, I don't think, because I just don't want to put much more effort into this one. But I just think it's cool. I mean, hopefully that's helpful to you, some of you, if you haven't looked at diffing and stuff before. But it's fun. It's a fun way, and that's typically what people do. People who do patch diffing watch the CVSS score, read the complexity, read the description, and look for ones that would be useful. If you can weaponize this thing, it will be an extremely powerful vulnerability to exploit, because you just send packets to any system that has IPv6 enabled in the driver, right? All right, let me go back to my my notepad to see what else I had up here. Cool. I can go back out to the screen where I can see comments now too. All right, I am back now. I see somebody say, Jared says, does Steven read these comments or is it on Discord? Yes, I do read the comments, but I only have one screen. I'm not home right now. I normally have multiple monitors and I can see the comments and everything all at once. But when I'm doing this, I've got to either all be in on the VM or see both. So cool. Let me talk through a couple other things. Community, all I wanted to say there, I think I said a bunch of this at the beginning, but I'm looking for additional ways to, like, my camera's locked up, isn't it? Uh-oh. Can you hear me still? Or have I been talking for a while and no one's been able to hear me? I hope not. Okay. Because my camera is paused. Can you just let me know you can hear me? Somebody say? You can? Okay. Let me try to kill my camera and turn it back on again. Oh, weird. My camera's dead. Oh, well. Well, you can just see the paused image of me and pretend I'm moving my lips. Yeah, that's good. Well, that's great, because I was afraid that I was talking for 15 minutes and you guys couldn't hear me or see me. That would have sucked. All right. Well, yeah, community. Always looking for more ways to give back. Like now that Defcon's over, I said I'm going to give away a couple tickets to Hackfest Hollywood. But as more money comes in from members, and thank you again to anyone out there who's a member, like that's really, really cool. The way that the channel's gotten money, just to be transparent, is through ad revenue, which is terrible. I think I've made like $1,200 in the last year, whole year of doing these streams in ad revenue. That's how bad it is, unless you get millions of subscribers. Then I've got members. We have like 20, 25 members right now, which isn't much, but it's better than nothing. And a lot of the members have been like ongoing for months. So I really appreciate that, because that's what is going to allow me to give back to the community. And then the other one is through donations. Like a few people have reached out and been like, hey, I don't want to give YouTube any of the cut. Can I just send you through whatever link and do it that way? That is how I was able to send a couple people to Defcon this year. And I'm working with Miscreants to get merch. I want to get some of that created. I got to hook my mods up on Discord with some merch, because they've been helping out for a long time now. But then I want to be able to give some merch away. I also want to sell merch and then take any profit from it and, you know, buy somebody a class or whatever else we can do for the community. So if you have any ideas for community give back stuff, I'm always open to it, and let me know. Discord's a great place for that info. And if you want to join as a member, I appreciate it. My intention is to do some videos. I have been slow on it, but I want to do some private videos, things I can't show on here, like cracking software and stuff, like commercial software that you can't put on YouTube or you get in trouble. I just got to do it. And all that stuff is helpful. So Defcon, VR, we just talked about VR. I just showed the TCP IP bug. Defcon, I don't know how many of you were there. I was there, obviously. It was a pretty good event. The new location was interesting. It's got pros and cons. Like the thing I liked about the new location in the convention center is that everything's under one roof and you can get the stuff more easily. It's like makes more sense. It was still kind of messy in the tables where the villages were, like in the back. It was just like a bunch of tables and it was kind of hard for people to concentrate and all, but I like that it's under one roof. I don't love the venue in that it makes it feel like the RSA conference where it's very commercial. It kind of loses that dodginess, you know, dystopian kind of feel walking through weird hotel rooms into other hotels and stuff, but it probably makes more sense for the event. But overall, I thought it was cool. I got to run into and meet a lot of really great people. So hopefully if you were there, you enjoyed it as well. Q&A, yeah, let's go through a little bit. We've been on for an hour now, so I'll go a little bit longer and try to answer some questions that I wasn't able to get to before. Um, let's see here. So I'm not going in any particular order. You might want to think of doing some short vids, like 10 minutes on point. Yeah, you're right. I think shorter videos is certainly helpful. How do you find a new attack surface? A large company like Microsoft must be working on core kernel, adding new stuff. Like, yeah, so attack surface is like, that's actually part of the fun, is trying to find a new attack surface, because there's so much to choose from. And every time a new feature comes out, like perfect example, Microsoft implemented the secure kernel, and they have things called IUMs, isolated user mode processes. And LSAS was like one of the first ones to get moved over as LSA ISO.exe or whatever in the secure kernel side of the house. And so in order to get to LSAS now and to get the credentials, obviously Mimikatz doesn't work anymore that way. So there must be a conduit and broker to get you over to the secure kernel. So how does that work? Like, that is an example of a new attack surface. Now that's an attack surface that was part of a mitigation. So that still though means that there's new things going on. Like, I would guess right off the bat that with a new brokerage system like that and a new secure kernel instance, obviously the hypervisor is being used. They're using secondary level address translation. That's why I had two people on to talk specifically about debugging hypervisors and how you debug the secure kernel, because that could be a new attack surface that you look at. So it's all about just picking something. One example I gave a while ago when I was talking about memcopy and how memcopy is involved in so many vulnerabilities, because it takes an unsigned argument as a size. But if you can get it a negative value, you're gonna go out of bounds. So heap overflows and things like that. I like to do stuff like, what is something that administrators use? What's a semi-public service? Like, think about how Checkpoint found the DNS SIG-RED vulnerability. They said, what's a good semi-public service? DNS, mail, and web. Those are the three biggest semi-public services that every company has. So if you can find a vulnerability in DNS, that's going to be a pretty legit bug. And so they did that. And we went through that bug in a prior stream. But a good way to start is like, pick a attack surface. One example of one that I started working on, but I didn't get very far on because of time, is Microsoft Terminal Services. Who uses Microsoft Terminal Services? Administrators, for the most part. And what does it do? It allows for remote desktop protocol control, right? So if you choose something like that as your attack surface, you think about, well, if somebody's using RDP, that's a lot of data that has to go back and forth, right? You're sharing a screen. So that's a lot of data. So in order to do that efficiently, aren't they going to use compression? Absolutely. So they use compression, obfuscation, and encryption over RDP. Those in itself are complex, and it's all going over TCP/IP. So I started taking the Microsoft Terminal Services DLLs, the libraries, and looking for calls to memcopy. So you look at the import address table, you look at memcopy, you look at the cross references, and you associate those in relation to decompression functions, deobfuscation functions, de-encryption functions, and those are the ones that are going to be useful. So I started taking decompiled code from those functions that are in relation to decompression that have memcopy calls in them, and I sent it to AI, so I use ChatGPT or whatever, and I say, hey, can you help me determine how the size argument for memcopy is built? How's it constructed? And it's able to go through and take those complex, there's very complex code that's calculating that size argument. And it goes straight back to that point I was making with DNS SIG-RED. With DNS SIG-RED, you change over from UDP port 53 to TCP port 53, so you can send more data. You utilize the DNS security, DNSSEC stuff, and the signature stuff, and you craft very large packets. They found an integer overflow that then leads to a heap overflow. But again, memcopy, right? So the way in which the size arguments are calculated for memcopy are dynamically constructed most of the time, and it can be very complex. So using AI to help you, using your own skills of reversing and reading the decompiled code is the way you find new vulnerabilities. It's just one way you find new vulnerabilities. And I found a couple. I was able to get Microsoft Terminal Services to crash a couple times because I was able to get it negative values by constructing over the RDP session some specific packets. But that in itself requires that you have to either find or write your own client to be able to talk back and forth and be in the middle and craft those packets in a certain way. But I'm just literally telling you right now, there are a bunch of bugs in RDP in direct relation to memcopy and decompression routines that I've gotten crashes from. Do I know that they're exploitable? No, but there probably some are very likely exploitable. Tavis Ormady a long time ago was like, oh, I'm bored this weekend. I think I'm going to look at the NTFS driver. The NTFS driver, that's another attack surface. Like, just identify an attack surface that if you were to find a vulnerability in it, it would be meaningful, and then just go in on it, because most likely not many people have dug in really well to most of these attack surfaces. Some of them superficially and some of them in depth, but there's just one path you can take to go and do it. So what's this say? But in those cases, underlying component is going to be same. For instance, I'm looking for iPads, even for terminal services under the hood, would use the same thing. I'm sorry, I'm not directly following the question. If you could rephrase it a bit, I think I'm just missing something there. But let's see here. Video sysadmins looking for hypervisor talks. Yeah, well, hypervisor talks. There's two of them recorded. One was from Daniel Fernandez, who is one of the authors of Gray Hat Hacking with me. He wrote the 3 chapters on hypervisor attacks, and then the other, I just forgot his name. He's got the company where they have a really cool way using JTAG of doing hypervisor debugging. He's been posting some good videos as well, but the one he did on the stream was really good because it showed you directly how to use JTAG to get into the secure kernel. And when they do stuff like that, this is another way to look at attack surfaces, is new opcodes are introduced, new instructions are introduced to the x86 64-bit architecture in order to be able to do this type of stuff. So with those new instructions, they become a direct relation to the attack surface, and just taking all that into account. Let me see here. Instead of buying a class, maybe we can start our own class, and the person go to the class for free. I'm not sure if that makes sense. Yeah, I can't write courses that are competing. Let's see. Common for researchers to try to break exploit protection mitigations of Windows. Yeah, I put a ton of videos. If you look at the channel under the live section, there's a ton of videos on reverse engineering exploit mitigations. That's part of my Defcon talk, was reversing exploit mitigation. And so that's how you go about finding ways around them, right? Is to understand how they work under the hood. And there's been tons of bypasses or just ways to work with or around the mitigation. A lot of times it requires you to live off the land a bit more too, so you don't get busted. But and that's what Connor McGar is going to talk about. Like I said earlier, he'll be talking about KCET, kernel control flow guard, and virtualization-based security with HVCI. So he'll go in depth. If you saw Connor's talk on here last time, he went on for like 3 hours showing how to get around HVCI in a certain way and how to use previous mode technique, and really, really great presentation he gave. Super smart guy. Let's use Discord stream. Can't we use a Discord stream which are more private for such events when you get time busy? Yeah, absolutely. I can. That's where if I do stuff that I can't show on YouTube, I'm going to do it through Discord. But that'll be for the member stuff, because I don't have time to do like both stuff for the members and then stuff for non-members, and then also the main streams that I do here. But I do as much as I can. Did I miss anything? Let's see. Short videos. Yeah, I agree with that one. Anyway, hear me the whole time. Sorry, I'm just going back and looking through comments here. What are my thoughts on defense contractors? It seems that it's the only industry that seems to employ exploit development. That's not entirely true. I mean, obviously, defense contractors and 3-letter agencies themselves have a lot of those people. But I just mentioned earlier IBM X-Force. That's where Ruben Boonen and Chompy work right now. They absolutely are always hiring good exploit developers and reversers. Palo Alto Networks has people, Microsoft has people, Google Project Zero, obviously, Exodus Intelligence, IO Active, Apple has security researchers working for them. There's a lot of third parties that are working to try to discover vulnerabilities for exploit acquisition companies like CrowdFence and others. There's a lot of jobs that hire for that stuff nowadays. It's not like the past. You can also work at like ZDI for Tipping Point, a zero-day initiative. There's a lot. There's a whole lot. Let's see here. So the new comments aren't showing up for some reason. There we go. Where's the link on Discord? Let me put that back up again. Banners. Discord. There is the Discord server up on the screen again. Trying to get back to the comments real quick. We're going to wrap it up soon here, but I'm just going to answer a couple more questions if they show up again on the screen. My window for StreamYard is not showing me the comments. There they are. Will I ever cover more Defcon, pwn, and reversing challenges like V8, browser pwn, kernel town? It's obviously way easier to show. It's obviously way easier to show digestible ones like the heap challenges and stuff that are intentionally written to be vulnerable. The going through the more challenging ones like V8, that's, oh geez, I just lost the stream. All right. All right. Hopefully you can hear me. I don't know what happened there, but the screen's back. My camera's back. I was just answering a question. What the heck was it? It was about DEFCON challenges and stuff. I'll definitely some DEFCON challenges for sure, but the V8 stuff that would take hours, like hours and hours on a stream to go through V8. That is very complex. I mean, I think one thing I might do if you're down for it is have a stream on Chrome V8 internals. Like we can start there and do a stream just on internals a bit, because you need to know some of that before you can even think about looking at exploitation and stuff of it. But that's a good idea for a stream. Do I consider defense contractors and their services ethical? I mean, obviously that's that's a very ethical matter. It's up to your morals, right? And understanding what they're using it for. Like I live in the United States, I live in California. If I sell an exploit to an exploit broker that is going to give it to the intelligence agency here, I know obviously that they are going to use that to break in to other nations' computers, probably, right? Non-NATO countries and stuff like that. That's definitely a very personal thing for each person. I sell my exploits typically to companies that are going to work with the vendor to get it patched. So it pays a little bit better than direct to vendor, but not as much, obviously, as going the unethical route. The only thing going beyond selling to your own government is then selling it to some other government that's going to attack your country with it. But I have a whole stream on that, like how my thoughts on that whole matter. 2 weeks ago, I did a stream on it. We spent like an hour and something talking about it. So if you care, like my personal stance, go check out that stream. It's a long one on it. Yeah, thanks, Fleet. Yeah, I do appreciate it. If you can post, like I said, comments and the like button and all that annoying stuff people say, smash the like button, you know, it is helpful for the channel. And that's what I care about, is growing the channel so that we can reach more people. Let's see here. Most jobs remote or in person. If you work for the government, it's going to be in person. Obviously, if it's not, if you were at the level where you can do vulnerability research and be effective at it and work at Microsoft, they don't care where you live. Like Google Project Zero, those guys are all in Poland and all over the place, Sweden, some in the States, Canada. Microsoft, same thing. If you're at that level, you can pretty much work wherever you want. No one's going to make you work in the office. Same thing if you work at places like Exodus Intelligence. You could be anywhere in the world. Let's see. Where's the link to Discord? I already posted that. Yeah. If you go to the Discord, there's a channel on there called Stream Requests. Post the names in there because I'll lose those as soon as I shut the stream off. And that's what I use to go and try to reach out to people. If I don't know them, sometimes I'll make an introduction and get a response. Sometimes people don't respond. Sometimes I might ask for somebody to give me an introduction. I've had a lot of luck with it so far, so I think we've been really lucky there, and I'm appreciative of that. Some frac resources, man. Frac is amazing. I'm so sad it only comes out every 5-6 years now, but it's understandable. I mean, frac came out in 1995, I think. Was it 85? It was a long time ago. It might have been 85. But that frac stuff, one of my favorite ones still to this day is the Malik Maleficarum. I loved that one when it came out. Cool. Okay. Yeah, I think we'll wrap it up then. Unless anybody's got a last minute question here. Yeah, 85. Thanks. That's wild. Just to think that people were doing that stuff in 1985, it's freaking awesome. When it comes to Chrome, I've made a few tools for parsing cache files. Nice. Binary files. And various binary files. Potentially, for sure. It all depends. I mean, it depends what it actually is able to get. But yeah, for sure, it could definitely be something that's useful. If it's public or whatever, just send me the Git link. I'll take a look at it for sure. Isn't terminal service only accessible from media integrity shells? How did I miss that up on the screen? Well, so I don't know if it's changed. When MIC came out, mandatory integrity control, which is those integrity levels you're talking about, it was a partial enforcement of like BIBA or Clark Wilson or Lattice or Bella Padula, one of those models. And there was low, medium, high, and system. And medium, so I think medium was a regular user, right? Or was it low? And then admin was high, and then system, you can get system if you're admin, so it doesn't matter. And then they came out with Google Chrome was the first one to use the next level down. They put a 5th level in that can't even read file mappings into the browser window and stuff like that, which is crazy. I'm not 100% sure where that's at right now, but the thing is most people using terminal services are admins. So usually they're running with a higher MIC label. Can I get a ticket for Hackfest Hollywood, California? Well, where do you live, Aaron? If you're international, it's free for online, but if you're close to LA, I'm going to be giving a couple away. I noticed there is a Sans C for Windows Dev course. So I think I posted it before. Jonathan Ryder did a 7 or 8 part, 2 hours each series. So it's like 16 plus hours of C workshops, all about learning C, introduction to C. It's up on the Sans website. Again, it's free. 16 plus hours of workshops. It's amazing stuff. And that he did for people who want to go and take his course, which is a course on implant writing and user land. And then he's working on more material for kernel land. But that's great resources for that. Jared says, I got my first job as reverse engineering and exploit developer. I thought it was a dream job, but I found out it was just a job. Any thoughts or advice? I mean, I don't know what that means. I don't know what you mean by like what's wrong with it. Are they making you do things and look at things you don't want to look at, or not giving you enough freedom to do things, or you ending up doing other things aside from what you were supposed to be doing? It all depends. Obviously, the more you build up in the public domain, the more you can share, the more presentations you do, the more research you publish, the more tools you've written, the more experience under your belt, CVEs, all that stuff. It's going to make it pretty easy to pivot over. But if that's your first job doing it and you haven't been there long and you're not getting the experience you want there, then you're almost starting at ground zero again. But I think I told this story one time when I was working at a company, a big company, I'll just say, and hundreds of thousands of employees. There was a team there that I wanted to work in. It was a product security team. Those were the guys that were ripping apart anything that came in, ATM machines, point of sale systems, whatever it is. And I wanted on that team. And I wasn't in that team. I was doing code review. And I wanted to stop doing code review, using Fortify all day. And so I started writing tools and doing research and sending it to them, to the team I wanted to be on. They had no openings at the time. I just kept like writing IDA Pro plugins, extensions, or whatever, scripts, and sending them over. Hey guys, I don't know if you could use this, but here it is in case it's useful to you, and just kept sending it over. And finally, after doing that for months, they were like, who is this person? Why is he not on the team? Because he's giving us all this stuff and it's helping our job. Like, that's one way I got it to work. So like, there's different ways into those types of positions, but you just got to build it up. The Discord's up on the screen, or it was. Where did it go? Let me put the Discord back up on the screen again. There it is. There is the Discord. Okay, last call here. I don't know why StreamYard is just so miserable to use lately. I got to find a new platform. Do you know of any good firmware images to practice reverse engineering? Yeah, ever since Microsoft bought Binwalker, what's going on there? I mean, we used to have IoT nights at the conferences, and there would be a table set up in the front of the room, and we'd have all this different firmware. I've actually got, maybe I should publish that. I've got, it's not crazy or anything, but I've got a folder with like 20 different firmwares that I already extracted and did all the obnoxious like LMZA, whatever extraction. Going through, connecting a Bluetooth phone to a IoT product, and for the first time, it immediately starts updating the firmware. So you've got to have Wireshark running and capturing that. Like, I've got about 20, I think, different firmwares in a folder. I can publish that, and some of those are really good ones to go in. We'll go into, because we found some really good vulnerabilities in a lot of that stuff, and so I know that some of them have good stuff in it. So let me take a look at that, and I'll see. It could be a good stream too, maybe. But I'll look for the ones that have some good stuff in it and post them, and then those might be some good ones. Other than that, no, I'm not really sure off the top of my head. Questions are taken from Discord. No, when I'm live, I take them through the chat right here. But cool. Yeah. Somebody else mentioned OBS. Thanks. I have one of those little OBS things too, a cool little thing that's got the buttons on. I just got to figure out how to use it. All right, last one here. I'm a Windows sysadmin and learn AD pen testing. I can script with PowerShell and do some bash scripting. Would it be better starting C programming or jump into RE? I mean, here's the thing. So my last comment, we're gonna go. I've said this before too. One thing is that the truth is always in the assembly, right? So when you decompile stuff, if you know how to read C, then you're gonna be a lot faster reversing, because you can look at the decompiled code and it makes sense to you. But a lot of times the decompiled code can be wrong. It can be misleading, and the truth is always in the assembly, because that's the disassembled opcodes. That's the mnemonic instructions. So a lot of times we'll jump back and forth between decompilation and disassembly. But disassembly, if you're reading that all day, is really slow. So you need to be able to do both. And the only way to do that is to know how to read C, C++. But a lot of people who get into reversing and exploit development, they don't know how to do any development. And you don't have to be a master developer, but fundamentals are important. And the people who don't know how to read code, they end up spending all their time in the disassembler because they can't read the decompiled code. So my recommendation would be learn as much C as possible. Take that course that I told you. It's on the SANS website. It's free. It's 16 hours of free C training, and get up to speed. Start reading. Learn how to import the function prototype data and recreate structures, and be able to answer questions like runtime polymorphism versus compile time polymorphism, and why do this, why do that, like. What's a semaphore? What's a spin lock versus a excuse me, spin lock versus a wow, my brain just like had a brain fart, or whatever you want to call it. It rarely happens, but when my brain jumps all over the place and I'm talking about one thing and jump to another thing, it can like just lose stuff. But when you're dealing with something like a synchronization issue and you need to lock, like in my presentation on Defcon, I talked about how we acquire a lock on the token, and we can get a mutex, we can get a spin lock, we can do different ways to go about doing that, and why you would use one versus the other. And on the Linux heap internals, when I talked about on the stream, we talked about how you do T-cache bins coming out, and that allows for not every thread to only have its own stack, but also gets its own heap or heap subsegment. So there's a lot of cool stuff there. But and my point is, like, knowing all that stuff, like learning about that stuff is going to go a long way in reversing. So, all right, since you were a code reviewer and I'm starting in the same position, do you have any advice on research to improve as a code reviewer? Hey, Nup, I was saying earlier, man, you're coming on to do a stream to control flow guard at some point. We're going to get that sorted out. But when I did the code review, it was early on when Fortify came out and Veracode. But Fortify is what we use because HP or whoever it was willing to grow the product with us because it only supported so many languages and we needed additional support for different languages. And the problem is when you're working in a team, in a company where there's a lot of different languages being used, Fortify supports a whole bunch of them. And you can't know all of them. Obviously, it's easy to jump from one language to another. My problem with the code review tools is that the false positives, one was the false positives. It was riddled with false positives, and that's just really frustrating. And also, it lacked, at least the time that I was using Fortify a lot, and there's many other tools besides that, but it didn't give you enough context information. So what I ended up doing, and this is, I guess, one example of something I'll tell you that helped me out, is I started working with the development teams and said, hey, it annoys you guys when I come to you with a bunch of Fortify data and I say, what's this, what's this, what's this, what's this? Because then you guys have to go back and look at the context and it slows you down. I don't want to be that person. So could you do me a favor, run Fortify yourself against it before you send it to me, and then you'll see what I see. And you can say, not interesting, not interesting, not interesting, and just put a little information. Yes, it takes more work. What we ended up doing is hiring an additional resource that became the security advisor who would help them run the Fortify scans and triage it before it got to me. And then I would go through and look at the stuff that might actually be meaningful, because the next thing we had to do oftentimes, which is where the exploit development experience comes in, a lot of developers are very stubborn. So you've got to prove to them that something is actually a problem before they'll go and fix it. And once you build that relationship up where they actually respect you as a developer or as someone who can do that, by showing them that the bug, the vulnerability that they introduced is actually exploitable and here's why, then they're like, okay, I'm going to listen to this person because they are helping me do my job. And like that, just getting that relationship with the developers was super helpful. And there's different ways you can do that, but that actually would be a good stream in itself. So I'm going to go. Great to talk to you on a Saturday. Thanks for joining. How many people do we have on here, by the way? I'm just curious. Just because it's Saturday. We have currently 838 people. So not as much as a Friday, but that's still pretty cool. So thanks for hanging out with me during this. Have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll see you next week. Next week's stream is going to be with Doug McKee on reverse engineering a packet that's an undocumented packet type, protocol, undocumented protocol, and how you might go about doing that. So we will see you next week. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it. See you.